It all started with a note. Not just any note, but one slapped onto my boat by the HOA, bright yellow and bold, calling it *jump *, and demanding I remove it immediately. But here's the kicker. This wasn't just an old fishing boat or a broken-down speedster taking up space in the neighborhood. It was a retired military patrol boat, fully documented and recognized by the federal government. A piece of our nation's history, and the HOA, they had no idea what they were messing with. At first, I thought it was just a mistake. Maybe someone on the board didn't recognize what the boat was or assumed it was abandoned. But when I reached out to explain, calmly, respectfully, I was shut down. They doubled down, threatening fines and even talking about towing it away. That's when things started to feel personal. I had restored this boat with my own hands. It had served in actual combat zones, and now it was being called trash. I wasn't just frustrated, I was stunned. This was more than just a disagreement over a boat. It felt like a total lack of respect for military service and history. I tried again to reason with them, even offered to provide all the federal documentation. But instead of listening, someone took matters into their own hands. And that's when the real trouble began. One morning, I walked out and saw it. My boat had been defaced. Stickers torn off, markings scratched out, federal markings. That's when it stopped being a neighborhood squabble and became a potential federal offense. The kind of thing that could come with serious consequences, not for me, but for the HOA. And just when I thought this story couldn't get any crazier, the feds got involved. So, how did a simple HOA complaint turn into a federal investigation? And what happened when the board realized they had vandalized protected government property? Stick around, because what came next shocked even me. After the initial shock of finding my boat defaced, I started digging deeper into how this whole mess even began. The HOA has strict rules about what you can keep on your property, but I never imagined those rules would lead to this level of conflict, especially not with something as unique as a military vessel. It wasn't just any boat. It was a fully functional patrol craft, complete with official federal registration and markings that proved its history and importance. I reached out to the HOA board members, hoping to clear things up quietly, but their responses were cold and dismissive. They insisted the boat was an eyesore, a violation of community standards, and they wanted it gone, no questions asked. I explained that the boat wasn't abandoned or junk, but a piece of history and federal property. I even offered it to display documents to prove it. Still, they wouldn't listen. Then, something strange happened. I started hearing rumors that a few neighbors had complained not just about the boat's appearance, but about its official markings. Apparently, some folks thought the federal symbols made the neighborhood look too military, or that it somehow violated the HOA's aesthetic rules. It was baffling. How could a community designed to respect each other's space turn on something representing our country's service? Things escalated quickly after the defacing. The scratches weren't random acts of vandalism. They targeted the official federal numbers and insignias on the hull. That's a big deal. Defacing federal equipment is illegal. And the moment I saw that, I knew this wasn't just a simple neighborhood dispute anymore. It was something far bigger, something that could bring serious legal consequences. I tried to stay calm, but the tension was building. The HOA board had crossed a line, and now I was caught in the middle. What I didn't know was that this was just the beginning. The federal authorities had been notified, and they weren't about to let this slide quietly. So, what happens when a local homeowners association tangles with federal property laws? And how far would the HOA go to enforce their rules, even if it meant breaking the law? The next chapter of this story gets even more intense, and I'm about to share everything with you. As the federal investigation began to unfold, the situation got even more complicated. Suddenly, I wasn't just dealing with a stubborn HOA board. I was navigating a legal maze involving government officials, neighborhood politics, and questions about property rights. The conflict wasn't just about a boat anymore. It was about respect, authority, and understanding. From my side, This boat was more than metal and paint. It was a symbol of service, sacrifice, and a chapter of my life I'm proud of. I wanted to preserve it, honor it, and share its story. But the HOA saw it differently, something out of place, a nuisance, disrupting their neat, cookie-cutter community standards. Meanwhile, some neighbors started weighing in. Some were sympathetic, even curious about the military boat's history, asking questions about where it had been and what it had done. Others sided with the HOA, complaining about property values and keeping the neighborhood uniform. It became clear this wasn't just a one-sided fight, it was a community divided. Then came the federal side of things. I learned that damaging federal property isn't just frowned upon, it can carry serious penalties. The defacing of the boat's official markings wasn't just disrespectful, it was illegal. That put the HOA board in a very precarious position, and I wondered how many of them truly understood what they were risking. I could almost hear the wheels turning in their heads. Did they realize they might be facing fines or worse? At the same time, I was wrestling with my own frustrations. How did something meant to honor service end up sparking so much conflict? Could this situation have been handled differently? Was there any hope for compromise? Or was this about to turn into a full-blown legal battle? Every call, every email, every meeting added new layers to the story. The boat sat there, still marked with scars from the defacing, a silent symbol of the growing conflict. And as the federal investigation deepened, the tension didn't ease, it tightened. What will happen next? Will the HOA back down or double down on their stance? And how far will the government go to protect this piece of federal property? The answers are coming, but they're not simple, and they're far from over. Days turned into weeks, and the tension in the neighborhood became almost unbearable. Every conversation, every glance felt charged with an unspoken question. What would happen next? The boat, once a proud reminder of my military service, now seemed to have become the battleground for something much bigger. Community pride, authority, and justice all tangled together. The HOA board grew more aggressive, sending official letters warning of escalating fines if I didn't remove the boat immediately. They talked about community standards, like it was some kind of law, but the real law, the federal regulations protecting my boat, were a whole different story. I knew they were skating on thin ice, but they didn't back down. In fact, some of the members even hinted they were prepared to take drastic measures, including towing the boat away. Meanwhile, the federal investigation quietly gained momentum. I got calls from government officials explaining the seriousness of defacing federal property. They made it clear this wasn't just about me and my boat. It was about enforcing laws that protect military assets nationwide. The implications for the HOA were huge, but I wasn't sure if the board fully understood the weight of the situation or if they even cared. I could feel the pressure mounting from every side. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors, some urging me to stand firm, others warning that I might be stirring up trouble I couldn't control. I began to wonder if this fight was worth it, or if I was just a pawn in a much larger game. The boat still sat there, battered but unbroken, a silent testament to everything at stake. Every day I expected to find a tow truck waiting or another letter demanding compliance. I was caught between two worlds, fighting for my rights as a veteran and property owner, while navigating the unforgiving bureaucracy of a homeowners association gone rogue. And then, just when it felt like things couldn't get any more intense, the HOA sent a final ultimatum. The clock was ticking. What would I do next? The showdown was coming, and neither side seemed willing to back down. The question was, who would blink first? Just when I thought the situation couldn't get any more tangled, a new twist turned everything upside down. Out of nowhere, a local news crew showed up at my door. Apparently, someone from the neighborhood had leaked the story about the military boat being called trash and the HOA's actions against federal property. Suddenly, my personal battle was no longer private, it was public, and the stakes skyrocketed overnight. The news coverage brought a flood of attention. People were shocked that a homeowners association would go so far as to deface military equipment, let alone risk federal penalties. Some viewers praised me for standing up to the HOA, while others questioned if I should have handled things differently. But the HOA board, they were furious. Their privacy invasion and handling of the situation had become headline news. On top of that, I started receiving strange calls from an unknown number, voicemails with nothing but silence or static. It was unsettling, and I couldn't help but wonder if someone was trying to intimidate me. The friendly community I thought I knew was now feeling like a hostile environment. Meanwhile, the federal authorities intensified their involvement, reminding me that tampering with federal property was a serious crime, but also that I had their support as the rightful caretaker of this boat. The contrast between the local HOA's hostility and the government's protection made the whole situation feel surreal. With public eyes watching, legal threats mounting, and mysterious intimidation attempts unfolding, the battle over my military boat had reached a critical point. I was caught in a storm of legal, social, and personal conflicts, and the pressure was relentless. What would happen when the HOA made their next move? And how far was I willing to go to protect not just my property, but what it stood for? The countdown was on, and no one knew how this fight would end. The day of the big meeting finally arrived, the moment where everything could either blow up or settle down. The HOA board had called a special session to discuss the boat, the fines, and the escalating tensions. I knew this was my chance to confront them face to face, to lay everything out on the table, and hopefully put an end to this nightmare. Walking into that room, the air was thick with hostility and nerves. The board members looked uneasy, probably realizing how far they'd pushed things. I stood firm and calmly presented all my federal documents, explained the history of the boat, and reminded them of the serious legal consequences of defacing federal property. I also shared how this boat wasn't just a piece of metal, it was a symbol of service and sacrifice. Some neighbors even spoke up in my support, sharing how they'd grown to appreciate the story behind the boat during the news coverage. For a moment, it seemed like the board might back down. There was tension, but also a flicker of understanding. Then, just as I thought we might reach some kind of truce, the unexpected happened. One of the board members, the one who had been the loudest about removing the boat, suddenly pulled out a folder. Inside were old emails and documents revealing that the HOA had been warned months earlier by a lawyer about the legal risks of defacing federal property. The board had knowingly ignored those warnings and had moved forward anyway. The room went silent. That revelation flipped everything. The board wasn't just misguided, they had acted recklessly, putting the entire neighborhood at risk. Suddenly, the power dynamic shifted completely. In the end, the board voted to withdraw all fines and rescind the removal orders. They agreed to work with me on a plan to properly maintain the boat as a community landmark, something to honor veterans and educate neighbors. It felt like a victory, but not a total one. Because just when I thought the storm had passed, the federal officials informed me there was one more surprise. During their investigation, they discovered the boat's logs contained classified information that hadn't been fully declassified yet. That meant the boat wasn't just a historical artifact, it was a key piece in an ongoing federal operation. This added a whole new layer of complexity and responsibility to what I was dealing with. So, while the HOA battle might be over, the real story and real challenge was just beginning. What would this mean for me, my boat, and the neighborhood going forward? Only time will tell. But one thing's for sure, this is one story you won't want to miss. After everything settled, I took a step back to reflect on what had happened. The conflict with the HOA had been intense and stressful, but it forced the community to face some hard truths about respect, history, and the importance of standing up for what matters. The boat, once seen as a nuisance, became a symbol of pride and a reminder of the sacrifices made by those who serve. Working with the HOA after their change of heart wasn't always easy, but we found common ground. Together, we created a plan to maintain the boat as a historical piece, adding plaques and educational materials so neighbors and visitors could understand its significance. Some neighbors even volunteered to help with upkeep, and that sense of unity made the whole struggle feel worth it. The discovery of the boat's connection to classified federal operations added a layer of responsibility I hadn't expected. It reminded me that history isn't always neat and tidy. It's alive, sometimes complicated, and often carries weight beyond what we see on the surface. I promised myself I'd handle that responsibility with care, honoring both the past and the present. This experience taught me a lot about perseverance, community, and the value of knowing your rights. It showed me how important it is to stand firm, but also to listen and find ways to bring people together. The story of my military boat isn't just about one man and one vessel. It's about respect for service, understanding, and the power of persistence.